Hey everyone, welcome to Break It Down Show starring Pete Turner. My name is Todd Nemet, and I'm usually heard on this podcast as a judge on the album fights. Those are a lot of fun, so I recommend you check those out, in particular the one where we pitted The Clash against the Kinks. I want to congratulate Pete Turner at rounding the corner on 1,000 episodes. I think Pete got his work ethic and his strong sense of discipline at an institution we were both involved in. Of course, I'm talking about working at Tower Records, where we bravely prevented a lot of people from accidentally buying a box set in the wrong format. Today's guest is Pulitzer Prize journalist and author Tim Weiner. He was the New York Times national security reporter, among a lot of other things. He's written a lot about U.S. intelligence services, probably most famously in Legacy of Ashes. It's a history of the CIA that the CIA itself suggests that you not read, so make of that what you will. His most recent book is The Folly and the Glory, which came out last September. It's about political warfare between the United States and Russia from the end of World War II right up through last year. That's like 75 years, so there's a lot to cover. One of the things I do in my copious spare time is tutor stuff like algebra and chemistry at the local high school, San Luis Obispo High. I do this as part of a program called AVID, which focuses on kids that want to be the first generation in their family to go to college. It's really made a huge difference in a lot of kids' lives. You can learn more about it or even donate at avid.org. Anyway, congratulations again on 1,000 episodes, Pete, and enjoy this episode of Break It Down Show with Tim Weiner.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Cruz.
This is Bryce Vine.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This
East.
is Sebastian Younger.
This is Daryl Amy.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summit.
This is Dr. Bob Greenberg.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, this is Tim Weiner. You're watching the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yes, indeed. Hey, I have Tim Weiner on the show. Tim, you write for The Post, a lot of other places. You've written your own book. There it is in the background. I see it. The Folly and the Glory. And you guys can get that on Amazon. There's a link there in the bottom third of the screen. And if you're listening on the podcast side, it will be in the show notes. And basically, you do a survey of U.S.-Russian, I guess you call it relations in general, from 1945 to modern times. And I just literally just finished the book a few minutes ago. I had to go back through several eras because, man, you've written a heck of a tome. I mean, there is so much density in this, so many characters and players. If you aren't already up to speed on this, in a lot of ways, it's like you need, a concordance of some kind to say, this is Alan Dulles.
The book does have the advantage of being short.
Yeah,
I have to say that.
Yeah, there's a lot of characters, though. The Dulles brothers. I mean, and when you start to put these things together and you look at the legacies, the different handing off, like this person worked underneath this. It's incredible. What struck you with the interconnectedness about all of these different characters and how you can easily reach back 50 years and have one connection?
Well, I think the magic of the book, if I may say so, is that there's a straight line from 1945 to today. We think of the Cold War as a historical era that ended when the Soviet Union collapsed. But the struggle between the United States and Russia did not end. That struggle went on. In the 1990s, the United States expanded the NATO military alliance to include Poland, Hungary, the Czech Republic, other nations, the Baltic states. It was going to incorporate Ukraine, all the nations that had been part of the Soviet Empire and under Soviet control. And the Russians saw this as an act of aggression. And Putin, when he took power 20 years ago, started to push back. And he struck a blow against his country 4 years ago today, when the Russians attacked our election. And they're still at it right now as we speak.
I have many questions for you. All right. So you picked 1945 of a starting date. It's such a complex time. How did you come to that date? And we can kind of explore that a little bit if you don't mind.
Well, World War II ended in 1945. And of course, during the war, America and Russia had teamed up to fight Hitler and fascism. And, we don't learn this when we learn our history, if we learn our history. But the Soviets lost 27 million dead in that war. And we lost 330,000 people. We'd all be speaking German in a way if it wasn't for Joe Stalin. So President Roosevelt died, of course. Harry Truman became president. He felt like the sun and the moon and the stars had fallen on him, he said. And, he didn't know a lot, Harry Truman. Joseph Stalin knew more about the American project to build the bomb before we dropped the bomb than Harry Truman did. That's a fact.
That's a fact. Yes.
Yeah. Because the Soviets had infiltrated the Los Alamos laboratories and the whole Manhattan Project and stolen the secret of how to build a nuclear weapon. So for a short time, America and Russia tried to work together. It didn't last more than a couple months. And, as Stalin and the Soviets began to knock off Eastern Europe and put it under their control, America tried to devise a response to this. And one of the things it did was create the CIA in 1947. We had never had a peacetime intelligence service. And we didn't know a lot about spying and espionage.
That's right.
Certainly didn't know that the Russians were, through their spies and through their American agents, cleaning America's clock in the 30s and 40s. So in 1948, a State Department senior officer named George Kennan, who had been the number 2 in the American embassy in Moscow, began to devise strategies on how to contain Soviet power. And he came up with the phrase political warfare to describe everything in a range from diplomacy to covert action to support for underground armies to push back against the Soviets and to stop them where they were until, lest they spread into Western Europe and around the world with their brand of Soviet communism. So that is political warfare, all the means at a nation's disposal, short of war, to project its power and push back against its enemies.
One of the things I've learned over the years about the history of the closing of World War II, and I used to be a combat spy, so I try to keep up on the early beginnings of CIA and OSS and all those types of things. But the realization by the Americans and the Brits that, oh crap, we haven't been multitasking. Russia has this huge advantage over us. They're way ahead of us in terms of the Yugoslavian states and, all of Eastern Europe and oh my God, probably Germany too. I mean, it was only kind of by luck that we got to keep a portion of it.
They got East Germany, we got West Germany, and, eventually the Berlin Wall went up.
Yeah.
But and Winston Churchill's deathless phrase, an iron curtain descended over Europe.
Yeah.
And for years, the CIA tried to pierce the Iron Curtain with paramilitary operations. Every one of them was a disaster.
Everyone. Yeah.
Every single one of them. I mean, it's no joke. I mean, hundreds of people died.
Yeah.
Recruited foreign agents from Poland to Russia to Ukraine to Korea to China. All these operations were suicide missions because they knew what we were up to.
One of the things we've learned, too, about this stuff is that in Berlin, it was the heart of the clandestine operations. And so there was a thing called Berlinery. And these are the things that are wrought from those failed excursions, into other people's places. Innocent people get killed. Innocent people get targeted. And so the Brits would watch the Germans who are watching the Brits, and we go, wait, why is that Brit talking to that? And you get all these things where the intrigue is, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but we didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah, that's it.
we had never run anything like the CIA. We had never really done espionage. Secrecy and deception. We're Americans. That's not our strong suit. And so it was, learning by our mistakes for a long time. What the Russians were really good at, I mean, the KGB was the biggest spy service in the history of the world. More than 500,000 people. And of course they engaged in espionage, but that wasn't their strong suit. Their strong suit was disinformation and deception. And starting in the late 1950s, they built what became a huge department of disinformation at the KGB. And the aims then, as now, they're the same. The aims were to weaken America by rubbing salt in the wounds of our body politic, like racism. They were to pit Americans against one another. They were to erode Americans' confidence in their government with conspiracy theories. For example, did you ever hear that the CIA killed John Kennedy?
Yes.
KGB disinformation. Did you ever hear that the FBI assassinated Martin Luther King?
Yes.
Also KGB information. Did you ever hear that the U.S. Army invented the AIDS virus?
Yes.
The germ warfare lab? Yes. Also KGB disinformation. Okay. So millions of Americans still believe this. And the point of these deceptions was to get us to believe nothing. That's what a conspiracy theory really does, is it erodes your belief in the truth. The truth you finally figure out if you're in the grip of a conspiracy theory is not out there. And this is how Vladimir Putin works. Do you remember in July 2018 when Trump and Putin were in Helsinki together? So they had a press conference. First, they went into a room and talked for like 2 hours, and nobody knows what happened because Trump ordered the translator to destroy her notes, the American translator. So they walk out. Trump's looking really hangdog. You know, he looks bad. And they get up at the podium, and a reporter asks them both, so the American intelligence services say Russia hacked the American election. They did, didn't they? And Trump says, well, you know, my intelligence chief, Dan Coates, the head of American intelligence, tells me that it was Russia. I have Vladimir Putin standing right here. He says it wasn't Russia. I don't see any reason to disbelieve Putin. I don't see any reason why it should be Russia. And at that point, that collective head of the entire American intelligence community explodes. They can't believe what they're seeing. But nobody remembers what Putin said next. He said, well, as to who can be believed and who cannot be believed, no one can be believed. No one can be believed. That's what he said. There are no facts and there is no truth. And that is the pointed end of the spear of Russian political warfare aimed at America. And now they have a spear carrier. He's been living in the White House for the last 4 years.
Let's back up and talk about some terms. You know, one of the things that we've believed, and we continue to go back to this well, you know, whether it's the Bush doctrine or whatever, is that freedom and democracy are universal values that people want. And what I've learned from being overseas is that how anybody else defines democracy, whether it's my next door neighbor or someone in Iraq, is totally different. You know, we might know the root words and the demos and power. Nobody cares about that. And so we have this flawed belief that we are all working with the same deck of cards, but in reality, Russia doesn't want that kind of democracy. They want certain aspects of capitalism and democracy, but not really all of it.
Yeah, well, here was our mistake. You know, 30 years ago, you and I are old enough to remember this. The Soviet Union collapsed, the Cold War was over, and a famous political scientist named Francis Fukuyama proclaimed, this is the end of history.
Yeah.
Okay, great. History's over. Terrific. Okay, now everybody can be like us, be like America. Everybody loves us, right? Well, maybe not Iraq, Iran, maybe not North Korea, but everybody pretty much loves us, and everybody wants to be like us. And we're going to project our power by importing American democracy and American capitalism overseas. They are one thing. They're like the two strands of the double helix of American DNA. And we're going to transplant that to your country. We give you, free of charge, American democracy and American capitalism.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't work in Russia.
It wouldn't gonna.
The dogs did not like our dog food.
No.
And, they incorporated the mercenary aspects of capitalism, the robber baron part. But the democracy, that transplant was rejected. And so what you have now is a former KGB officer has been in power for 20 years. He has made Russia a kind of a KGB state in which KGB veterans and the present serving intelligence services kind of run everything.
Yeah.
And he has projected Russia's power by using his reconstituted KGB as a kind of a mafia, exporting the wealth of Russia, extracting the wealth from their gas, their minerals, their oil, and using his intelligence services to corrupt Western politicians, to corrupt Western institutions with money and propaganda. It's a very effective technique. And in a way, it's a berserk mirror image of what we were trying to do in exporting American capitalism democracy. He is exporting Russian mercenary capitalism and autocracy. And he's finding audiences.
Yeah, for sure. Yasha Monk's done some pretty good work on that and talking about the growth and tolerance for totalitarianism, in places like Poland, which we didn't expect. And let's talk a little bit about Poland and our failure to understand, the Baltics. Like most people in America, I would say right now, if you said, hey, there is, the Baltics are on the Baltics, on the west coast of the Baltic Sea, and to the west of that is a little wedge of Russia, and it freaks everybody the hell out. Kaliningrad has to be there. No one's going to get rid of it. But these complexities, and I had a professor from Finland talking about, European defense and everything. It's like there are many Europes. And that blew my mind because, of course, there is, because what Finland wants and what Greece wants and nobody knows what Cyprus wants because they never have been resolved. And so when we go into a place, whatever president you want to pick, and they're trying to stabilize and democratize Poland, we don't have enough knowledge to even know. Like, I'll be critical of President Obama right now, but you could pick any president. When he went in and pulled a bunch of missiles out of Poland, Poland freaks out. They're like, you understand, we hate the Russians. We don't trust them for a second. We're here on the front line. What are you doing? And so all of these things draw power from different things as we try to balance the Russian side of the equation. It's exceptionally challenging to get right. Has any president from Truman to now really excelled at this?
When you say get Russia right, what do you mean?
Improve our position overall to where, like, when they got done with their administration, it was better and remained, it wasn't like they didn't turn out 18 years later to be a mistake.
One of the really good things about the way President George H.W. Bush, the elder, handled things at the end of the Cold War is that he didn't go, send American soldiers and spies, to plant the American flag on the rubble of the Berlin Wall. He didn't do a gigantic triumphalist number. He kept his powder dry. And when, in 1991, the KGB and the Soviet defense minister tried to mount a coup against Mikhail Gorbachev and restore the old Soviet Union as it was collapsing, Bush kept his powder dry. Again, he said, coups often fail. And this coup did. But the during the Cold War, nobody knew what was going on inside the Soviet Union. Nobody.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
The Soviets created this enormous Potemkin village, right? It's a worker's paradise. Everyone is equal here. The proletariat run everything, which was a lie, the big lie. Okay. But we didn't know what was actually going on in the Soviet Union. We didn't see the Soviet Union's collapse. until it was happening. Why? Okay. The United States spent literally trillions of dollars, $2 trillion plus, $2 billion in the Cold War, building weapons for World War III and building spy satellites that could look down on Russia from geosynchronous orbit and look into the Soviet Union and see what was happening. They were counting missiles. You know what they weren't counting? What they weren't looking at? They weren't looking at potatoes rotting in the fields because there wasn't enough gasoline to get them to market. They completely missed the decline and fall of the Soviet Union as it was happening. Because we didn't have any spies on the ground. We didn't. I mean, we had some, but in the 80s, they were all murdered. Yeah. Because of a turncoat at the CIA named Alder James and a turncoat at the FBI named Robert Hansen. All our spies in the Soviet Union, all our Soviet and Russian and Iron Curtain military officers, intelligence officers who were secretly spying for America, they were all murdered. Okay, so we were blind in the 1980s as to what was really happening, and we never had a spy inside the Politburo.
Not that lived for more than 10 minutes. I mean, no way. The other question I have for you with regards to kind of setting the bigger picture with this is, you know, we get really upset when Russia is interfering with our election, but we can't help ourselves. We interfere openly in people's elections all the time.
Now, wait a minute.
Okay.
We did. The last time, as far as I know, and I've been covering the CIA and American intelligence for 33 years now, the last time we did that, as far as anybody knows, was 20 years ago when the dictator of Serbia, Slobodan Milosevic, was having an election. President Clinton, in his last months in office, signed a covert action order authorizing the CIA to go in and support the opposition, the resistance to Milosevic, who was already indicted as a war criminal, but was running for election as president. And of course, there was above board help from the State Department, and, the National Endowment for Democracy and places like that. But the CIA did the nitty gritty work. I mean, they supported the opposition. They got them money. They got them secure communications gear. But that was it. We didn't do that anymore. What did we do instead? We fought the war on terrorism and projected American democracy at gunpoint. And that didn't work either.
Yes. You want freedom? Come and take it. We're here to give you freedom. Step in line. And we absolutely try to influence, and openly so, the Afghan elections. We said, as a nation, I think the Secretary of State, can't remember if it was Kerry or Clinton, said openly, you know, we prefer this outcome. And we were doing things with data collection.
But that's not the same as the CIA going in and trying to rig the vote. Yeah, they were openly running against the CIA selected leader of Afghanistan, Hamid Karzai. I mean, look, I've been to Afghanistan 7 times. I started going there in 1987 during the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, and I wound up covering the American occupation in the course of 7 reporting trips. The idea that you would impose democracy on Afghanistan is insanity. Okay? When I was reporting in Afghanistan in the 80s and 90s, the country had been completely destroyed by war. Okay? There was no electricity. There was no running water. There were no roads. There were no schools except madrasas, religious schools. And, you know, under the famous doctrine of General Colin Powell, you break it, you own it. The Pottery Barn doctrine. Yeah. Okay. We went in and we broke it again. Okay. In 2001 and 2002. Yeah. And we were under and remain under a moral obligation that before you put a nice, pretty coat of paint whose shade is called democracy on a ruined structure, that you rebuild the structure, roads, schools, decent living conditions. And we didn't do that because we were too busy killing people.
Yeah. I suppose I would push back a little bit on the whole influencing elections and saying, I'm not trying to equate the CIA's covert actions. It's for sure overt in many ways. But if you take it from the point of view of the Afghans or regional people in that area, Kazakhstan, whoever it's going to be, Turkmenistan, it's going to look like American influence. I mean, and we have a problem always of wherever we go of creating a puppeted person, whether we puppet or not, because of our actions and our history. Like,
right,
we get involved in people's stuff, and we tend to break it. I mean, we don't reliably create the outcome we would all want, and so I wouldn't put us above what Russia does. We certainly have our desires to look. Non-attributable statements created by American psychological operations people in places like Somalia or Ethiopia in the last 15 years has happened. So we do create these things,
Sure. And that is the PSYOPs division of political warfare.
Right.
Look, I don't want to draw moral equivalences.
Okay.
Between America and Russia, because that's a tricky business. And you can't say, well, because we ran coups against Guatemala and Iraq in the 1950s, and because we influenced elections everywhere from Japan to Italy in the 60s and 70s, then it's because we did it, it's okay for Russia to come in and screw with our election.
Yeah.
Okay. And that really doesn't work. Okay.
To be fair, I am not saying that. I'm just saying before we get too indignant.
People do.
Yeah.
It's anti-democratic when we do it, and it's anti-democratic when they do it.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But of course, we were doing anti-democratic works in the name of democracy, weren't we?
Yes. Yes.
So that makes a difference.
Yeah, it does make a difference. We're trying to do the right thing. Okay.
A subtle difference, I guarantee you, but a difference.
Yeah. I want to get back to a little bit to, okay, so when we're looking at our relations with Russia, George the Elder, did a pretty good job of closing down that phase of the Cold War. And then now we have Putin, who's been there for 20 years. In a state like this, a state like this in Russia, it doesn't tend to foster a good replacement. It'll be a carbon copy. That's less good, right? So at some point, Putin ages out of this job and someone else takes over. Is this a temporary uprising and they'll continue to fall back? Look, we have our flaws, but they have their flaws too. Will they break apart again and become even less Russian than they are now?
Well, look, predictions are very hard, especially when you're talking about the future.
Yes.
But, Putin has stated his intent to remain in power until 2036, when he will be 84 years old. Okay. Which would make him the longest ruling leader of Russia since Stalin. You have outdone Stalin. And, I think we have, are you talking about the prospect of regime change in Russia? Because that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the case. Like at some point, he is obsolete, whether he's dead, ill, or not powerful enough anymore.
Yeah, but maybe the United States. All right, let me take off my reporter, author, nonfiction hat.
Okay.
And I'll put on my spy novelist hat.
Ooh, I like it. Okay.
All right. So let's say that later on today, election day, the Russians pull something really nasty. And while we don't know their intentions, as you and I are speaking today, we know their capabilities. They can hack computers. They can hack electrical grids in major cities. They could plunge a major city into darkness. Because their candidate is not Trump, really. Their candidate is chaos. And if they can inflict chaos on America, mission accomplished. Let's say they do something really nasty, and then on January 20th, there's a new sheriff in town. Okay. And the president and the National Security Council and the head of the CIA sit down and they say, hey, that was an act of war, what they did to us. What would be a proportionate response? Well, what I would do, okay, is something that is also within our capabilities. And I would use the CIA and the National Security Agency and the Treasury Department's FinCEN Center, which goes after money laundering. And I would expose the fact that Vladimir Putin has stolen approximately $40 billion from the Russian people over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And expose his network of oligarchs, of Kremlin oligarchs, like the guy who ran the information operation out of the Internet Research Agency against us in the last election. Yevgeny Prigozhin, convicted pimp, got out of prison, ran a hot dog cart, opened a catering business, cooked a meal for Putin. Putin liked him. He became a chef. And now he's a billionaire Kremlin oligarch, fucking with our elections, pardon my language.
Yeah.
So I would expose Putin's kleptocracy and the entire financial network of Kremlin oligarchs, expose it all and indict them under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Expose him to the world as a thief as well as a brutal autocrat. Take him down a notch.
I would suggest that you talked about cracking, computer and everything else. They're also really good at cracking humans. I mean, Jack Barsky lived amongst us as an embed agent we never found him. He had to out himself. For a budget, I would say, of less than $5 million, you get some good crafty spy people. I would know about. Never done this, but I understand the work.
Well, but what did Jack Barsky ever accomplish?
Well, either way, he was here. We didn't know he was here. So, if there's one.
The sleeper agents.
Yeah.
That are the focus of the FX show, The Americans.
Yes. Yeah. He advised for that show.
Yeah. Okay. What did they ever accomplish?
I don't know. You tell me.
Bupkis.
Yeah.
Nothing. Okay. Yeah. They stayed asleep, those sleeper agents, trying to burrow their way into American society until they got marching orders. They never came, the marching orders. 10 years.
Yeah.
So, the specter of Soviet espionage, as I was saying earlier, was huge in the Cold War. The specter of Russian espionage, the old sense, spying. Okay. It's not so big anymore, but it's the information warfare, the deception operations. Those are not espionage as we know it. That's political warfare, as I define it in my book.
I mean, someone flips Ames, someone flips, Kim Philby. There's people out there doing counterintelligence, and they're creating double and triple agents even.
You know who I want to flip?
Who's that?
I want to flip the Russian intelligence officer, who is the curator of the file, very thick file, that's sitting in Russian intelligence headquarters right now. And it says D. Trump on the cover.
Yeah.
That's who I want to flip.
Yeah.
I want to know what he knows. Because the Russian and before them the Soviet intelligence services have been targeting Donald Trump since 1987. All right. That's not just me saying that. I've interviewed for the book and for my podcast based on the book called Whirlwind, 4 former CIA directors and a ton of people who ran Russia operations at CIA and FBI counterintelligence agents. All of them believe that when Donald Trump first went to Moscow in 1987. He's a rich American businessman with stated political ambitions. He's made noises about running for president, which grow louder after this trip. He's got a Czech wife to whom he is unfaithful and a pronounced Czech for Slavic women. None of that is terribly important. What's important is that Trump wants to build a luxury hotel in Red Square across from the Kremlin in partnership with the Soviet government. Good idea, Donald. Let's talk. If the KGB did not target Donald Trump on that visit, they would have been criminally negligent. And this is what Vladimir Putin did in his years at the KGB, when he was with the Leningrad KGB. He targeted businessmen. He blackmailed them. He extorted them. He manipulated them.
Yeah.
This is what Putin is trained to do. And I submit to you, let me back up.
Okay.
In the intelligence business, there are secrets and there are mysteries. Okay. Secrets you can find out. Mysteries are a lot harder. Now, it's no secret anymore that Donald Trump kowtows to Vladimir Putin. It is no secret that he has bent American foreign policy in Putin's favor. It is no secret that he is in some way in thrall to Vladimir Putin. And the question is why? Why? Okay. If you're an FBI counterintelligence agent, you're trained, your first day to memorize the acronym MICE: money, ideology, corruption, ego, MICE. Okay. Is it the money? Well, isn't it always the money with Trump? I mean, we have learned, thanks to my colleagues at the New York Times, that he's $421 million in debt, of which more than $300 million for which he, Donald Trump, is personally responsible, is coming due in the next couple of years. The Russians knew this before the New York Times knew it. Is it corruption? Do they have compromat, compromising evidence of Donald Trump's fraud and greed? Could be. Is it ego? Well, Donald Trump's vanity is taller than the tallest Trump Tower, and Putin knows that if he flatters Trump, offers him support, overt and covert, that he can influence Trump and win influence in return. But here's the thing I never understood. Ideology, the I mice. In the early Cold War, in the 30s, the 40s, the American spies like Alger Hiss, who spied for the Soviet Union, did it because of ideology. They started out as anti-fascists and they became Stalinists. The spies of the late Cold War, Alder James, Robert Hanssen, they did it for the money. Okay, I'm not saying Putin pays Trump. Nobody has proof of that. Nobody's seen Donald Trump in a grainy surveillance photo with a satchel full of Kremlin gold under a bridge in Vienna. I mean, okay, that didn't happen. But ideology, he digs Vladimir Putin's style. He likes the autocratic way. Okay. And Putin and the Russians approach Trump and the Republican Party, as they have repeatedly, saying, hey, we're just like you. We are Christians. We love guns. We hate gays. We're just like you. We're fraternity brothers. And to an astonishing extent, Trump and the Republicans buy this.
Don't we as Americans buy that stuff, though? Quite honestly, I mean, look, the files you talk about, and I totally agree. Like, if I'm going to run an op against Donald Trump as a counterintelligence agent, I'm thinking about how do I do that, right? I start early and I go after that ego and I try cocaine, I try women, I try befriend, all that stuff. And I only got to get it right one time out of my thousands of agents.
That's right.
Yeah. So, and the same thing with the election, countermanding that. Again, small budget. I find someone who's desperate for $10,000 and say, I just need you to do these small things. And if you give me a $5 million budget, I can change votes with $5 million, quite a lot. So the ability to undermine any election, I think if they want to, if it benefits the oligarchs and gets them money, $5 billion is a rounding error to those guys. They send an agent off that they can wipe off the earth. Either, if they die or they kill them themselves. I mean, Putin's not killing people because they're not operating clandestinely to impact people overseas. So who's immune to this? I mean, certainly not.
We are.
Okay.
Okay, or we were.
Okay.
Okay, the difference between today, election day today, and election day 4 years ago is that you have a president of the United States who's amplifying Russian disinformation.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about this for a minute. Okay. In the summer of 2019, Vladimir Putin planted a conspiracy theory in Donald Trump's ear. This is all documented. He said, Donald, it wasn't the Russians that hacked the election. It was the Ukrainians. They did it for Hillary Clinton. They did it. Go find the evidence. It's got to be there because I planted it. Okay. So Donald Trump goes up on this wackadoodle conspiracy theory that the Ukrainians hacked the 2016 election for Hillary Clinton. And what did he do? He got himself impeached over a Russian conspiracy theory. That's what happened. Okay. And now, for the last 4 months, he's been spouting Russian disinformation about Joe Biden, about Joe Biden's foster son, about Hillary, about everything, and he's got his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. He was on RT, the Russian television propaganda network, yesterday.
Yeah.
Spouting these crackpot conspiracy theories. Now, for an intelligence service to really get its hooks into somebody, money, great. Corruption, fine.
Sure.
Ideology, wonderful if you can get it. Ego, always there.
Yeah.
Fear. That's the hook. Okay. The Russians know something that we don't know yet, which is the nature of Donald Trump's financial desperation. How do they know this? Because they have his primary lender, Deutsche Bank, wired up the wazoo. Okay. They know who Donald Trump owes that money to. And they probably know a lot more if you accept the belief of CIA and FBI professionals that they've been targeting him for 33 freaking years. Okay. He kowtows to Putin. It's a theory because he's afraid of what Putin knows about him, afraid of its revelation. And, in the next administration, if there is a next administration, Donald Trump will no longer have the invisibility cloak of the presidency to protect him. He will no longer have immunity from prosecution. And here where I live in New York, we got a DA in Manhattan and a state attorney general. They're going after his corruption. They're going to get his tax records and his financial records unless somehow the Supreme Court quashes their subpoena, which I don't think is going to happen. Okay. And, I wrote a whole history of the CIA on the record called Legacy of Ashes. Entirely on the record. No blind quotes, no, anonymous sources, nothing. And the epigraph of that book, the little quotation in the beginning, is a quote from a 17th century playwright named Jean Racine. And the quote is, "There are no secrets that time will not reveal." All right, let me tell you a story to back that up.
Okay.
So I submit to you that Donald Trump has served as an agent of influence for the Russian Federation. An agent of influence, this is from the American Counterintelligence Handbook, is a person who holds power, political power, or authority, who can bend public opinion or public policy to the benefit of the countries that's manipulating them. Okay? Now, he wouldn't be the first elected politician in American history who served as an agent of influence. Let me take you back. Here in the 1930s, here in New York, we had a congressman from the Lower East Side of Manhattan. His name was Samuel Dickstein. Dickstein was the chairman of the House Immigration and Naturalization Committee. And he and his brother, who was also a lawyer, had a little sideline for years, going back to the 20s, which is selling passports. He'd been an immigration lawyer in New York before he was a congressman. So one day in 1937, Congressman Samuel Dickstein walks into the Soviet embassy. And he sits down with the ambassador and he says, "I would like to do you a favor. I can make passports available to you, knowing full well who would use these passports. It would be Russian spies." He said, "And all I ask for you is $25,000 a year retainer, 3 times his congressional salary, and a little extra on the side for special jobs." "Da," said the Russian ambassador. "Yeah, that's great." Samuel Dickstein served in this role for 3 years. He died in 1954, and he was buried with respect and honor. And if you go down the Lower East Side of Manhattan, you stand on the corner of Grand and Pitt Streets. You're standing in Samuel Dickstein Plaza. Samuel Dickstein's secret stayed a secret for 60 years until a former KGB officer who was working in the KGB archives under contract to an American publisher stumbled over his file. His code name, his KGB code name, was Crook because he was so greedy.
Yeah.
So there is an agent of influence in the government of the United States, a 12-term congressman whose secret stayed secret for 60 years.
Yeah.
I submit to you that 6 months into the new administration, we will be learning some of Donald Trump's secrets.
Maybe. I mean, they stay secret for a long time.
No, not maybe.
I'm just
okay.
Look, here's what I would say about that, because I know about counterintelligence, and you don't just go for one side of the aisle, right? You protect against all sides. And when I talk to a lot of people on this show, and I have my own specific experience. But when we look at the history of the presidency, the last person to not self-enrich themselves was, I don't know what, Jimmy Carter, maybe, through the White House. Oh, okay. Is there somebody else? I don't know. Who was it?
Yeah, Barack Hussein Obama. What do you mean enrich himself through the presidency? You mean writing a memoir?
Okay. Hey, I mean, if that's your guy, that's your guy.
We had 8 years under Obama and had 0 corruption scandals. None. Zip.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So writing a memoir is one thing. Turning the entire government of the United States or trying to turn the government of the United States into a subsidiary of your rotten Trump organization is quite another.
Yeah. Well, let's get away from that part because it's election day.
Election day. We have enough stress.
Yeah, I'd rather talk about some Russian intrigue from days of yore, because that's a little less. It's a better point of conversation. It's more enriching. What are some of the things you found out along the way that you're like, man, I've got to put this in the book, and didn't quite get it in the book because it just didn't fit within? Because
it didn't make it into the book?
Yeah. What are some of, because that your book is so concise, right? There's got to be things you're like, this doesn't serve the story. It's got to go.
I got to think about that. Nobody's ever asked me that.
That's a win.
Yeah, I wish there had been space to talk about a little more about the successes that Soviet espionage had in this country during and after the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
I dealt with some of that in my history of the FBI called Enemies. The penetration by Soviet espionage of the American government in the 30s and the 40s was quite sweeping. Not only did they penetrate the Manhattan Project to build the atomic bomb, they penetrated the State Department. They penetrated the Justice Department, an agent in the Foreign Agents Registration Office that was trying to track down Soviet spies in America. They had agents all over the Office of Strategic Services, which is our wartime civilian intelligence agency. They had a spy in the Army Security Agency, which, as you know, was the father of the National Security Agency, who told them that the Americans were breaking their code, and they changed their code. That was in 1949. They changed all their the coding machines for diplomatic and intelligence cables. There are some people who think that Henry Wallace, who was Franklin Delano Roosevelt's vice president in his third term and was thrown off the ticket in favor of Harry Truman, was an agent of influence for the Soviet Union. He certainly had the support of the American Communist Party. And then, of course, there are the cases. Well, I wrote an entire book earlier in my life about the Aldrich James case. But, in 1985, which became known as the Year of the Spy, it seemed like every week there was the bust of an unbelievable KGB spy network in the National Security Agency, in the Navy, in military procurement, even in the CIA. Okay, it's just one after another. I think there were 58 major spy cases that year. And there wasn't room for any of this, and I had written about some of the past, but the book would be a richer book if it had gone into some of the resounding successes of Soviet espionage in America in the 20th century. What are they up to now? I think that they have abandoned traditional espionage in favor of their go-to play in the Cold War, which is disinformation and deception.
I mean, you can influence people with the picture, and people will say, look at this evidence of this thing, and it could be completely canned up. I saw a big argument about a guy that carried an AT-4 into a Subway to get a sandwich. We literally had no idea what that was about. Was he a protester? Was he a movie prop guy? And it drove people insane. And all it is it is a picture. You have no idea of the validity of it. That absolutely disinformation is easy right now.
We don't know each other, but I'm going to make you a bet.
Okay.
Are you familiar with the works of QAnon?
I know they exist. I don't look into them, no.
Okay. Well, QAnon has got, I kid you not, my friend, millions and millions of Americans believe it. Not a couple of million. Millions. That the Democratic Party in this country is controlled by a Satan-worshiping cabal of blood-drinking pedophiles.
Oh boy.
And there are at least 2 Republican candidates for Congress who are totally QAnon believers who are going to get elected because they're in deep red districts. This is a conspiracy theory. Remember Pizzagate?
Yeah, I know it exists. I don't spend time in that kind of stuff.
The guy who shot up a pizza parlor in Washington because he thought Hillary Clinton had child sex slaves in the basement.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay, that's some QAnon stuff.
Yeah.
And it's driving people crazy.
It is.
Okay. I mean, some of them might have been crazy to begin with, but
Yeah.
they're driving them farther on down the crazy road. I will submit to you that when Q, the mastermind of QAnon, the identity of Q is revealed, a Q will turn out to be a 28-year-old Russian intelligence officer who has figured out how to drive America crazy.
Wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me if the guy sitting next to him is doing the opposite end of that, because you're going to cover your bases.
No.
No? No, okay.
We are not playing offense.
No,
in
I
this
mean,
realm.
I don't mean that. I mean, they are covering their bases on their end. So like if they're targeting the right with certain messaging, the guy sitting next to him in the cubicle next to him is targeting the left because they want this back and forth. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what the Internet Research Agency did in the last election cycle. They fought on three fronts. This is the Russian intelligence-backed Internet Research Agency of St. Petersburg that had hundreds of Russians posing as Americans online.
That's their St. Petersburg, not ours.
Correct. They fought on three fronts. The right front, the left front, and the black front. Okay. The black front, their aim was to depress the black vote in the 2016 presidential. The left front was to smear Hillary Clinton and support Jill Stein. Remember Jill Stein?
Sure do.
The Green Party candidate? Yeah. You could write a whole book about her. And the right front was to inflame conspiracy theories in a way that eroded people's trust in government. And once Donald Trump became a candidate, to support Donald Trump in the name of chaos. They don't care about Trump. They want chaos, and Trump is the chaos candidate.
They're not Trumpers?
So let me give you, you don't care about Donald? No. Okay, for example, you remember what Jade Helm was? Jade Helm?
Tell us so the audience knows.
Okay. So in 2015, the Pentagon and special operations forces from all the services were going to do a big military training exercise in the American Southwest, spread across 7 states. And they told people, okay, on July 15th, 2015, we're going to do Jade Helm. It's a training exercise for our special operations warriors. And, you're going to see us moving about the countryside. Well, on a distant corner of the internet in West Texas, some kook said, well, this is not a legitimate training exercise. This is Obama's going to declare martial law. And the Russian internet agency picked up on this little brush fire burning in Texas, and they dumped gasoline on it and put out hundreds, maybe thousands of Facebook posts and Twitters and, God knows what, saying, yeah, Obama's going to declare martial law. He's coming to take away your guns. That's what Jade Helm 15 is all about. Okay, they're gonna set up prisons and abandoned Walmarts. And the governor of Texas bought into this, and so did Ted Cruz, the Republican senator from Texas, who said he was going to hold hearings to find out what the Pentagon was really up to. Now that is a Russian operation, my friend.
Yeah, they're good at that. They're good at taking a grain of the truth and driving us all crazy with it. What on earth do we do about it? We've not proven over the years, the decades, to be reliably good at countering these messages, countering Russian intrigue, and no fooling. Turkey, Russia, the Bosphorus, Black Sea, Iran, that whole region has to operate in some semblance of normalcy to keep Russia stable and everything. I mean, there's a lot of complexities in that. I mean, we could talk about Turkey for a whole another 2 shows. It's part European, it's part Asian, it's 10 minutes from Africa. You have they're European. It's bonkers over there. So that little wedge of land, which would fit inside of, I don't know, North Texas to Kansas, probably, right? It's not a very big place, but it is entirely critical to the survival of that 3-continent cluster.
Yeah. What do we do? Well, again, my plan if I, become the director of Central Intelligence in the Biden administration.
So now this spy intrigue novel hat is off, and now okay.
would be to fight back against Putin by exposing him as a kleptomaniac and by exposing the entire network of corrupt Kremlin oligarchs that are pushing autocracy into Western nations through corruption and through media manipulation. Okay. We as a nation have gotten better at detecting disinformation than we were 4 years ago. Our BS meters are on now. Okay. Although they may not be very well calibrated, they're on.
Okay.
And what we need is a whole of government approach, not one agency. Okay. A whole of government approach to combating disinformation, to not just identifying it when you see it, but going after the source. Okay. And taking down the financial networks and the intelligence networks that support it. Take them down. Now, I mentioned that exposing Putin's wealth would be a high priority for me, if I were the next director of Central Intelligence, which I won't be. Rest assured, America.
Okay. Me neither.
Yeah, okay. But what if you could, through offensive cyber operations, not just expose Putin's wealth, but freeze it, or even make it disappear?
Yeah.
Because it's all zeros and ones, isn't it?
It is all zeros and ones.
Melt it.
Yeah. I mean, today's, yeah. I mean, the baddest warrior on the planet is not one of my SEAL friends. It's some dude who can marshal ones and zeros better than anybody else at the moment. And one thing I've learned in doing all these shows is you cannot bet against software engineers. And if you put the right person on the job, you can make an entire company disappear.
In this battle.
Yes.
Which is the next phase of political warfare. We, as a Western democracy, which we still are, at least for the next 12 to 24 hours, our strength is our weakness.
Oh, for sure.
We're an open society. Okay. We value freedom of speech and of the press, and we don't want to suppress speech. Okay. Which makes us vulnerable to lies if we're not smart enough or sharp enough to detect them as lies. So how can we make our strength become our strength again? By calling out the lies of autocrats, by calling out the lies of dictators and would-be dictators, not by sucking up to them, has been American policy for the last 4 years and has gotten us nowhere fast, but by standing up once again against the sources of these lies. An authoritarian society must be founded on falsehoods. The regime of an authoritarian depends on lies, and it falsifies everything. It falsifies the past. It falsifies the present. It falsifies the future. And as citizens, if you accept this, you have to live within a lie. We cannot run American democracy with a leadership that lies and that accepts foreign propaganda and disinformation as gospel. We have to start by somehow purging the American body politic of the poison that's been pumped into it for the last 4 years by the Russians and by our political leadership, and heal.
There's a lot of poison out there. And I would say it's gone on for a long time. I mean, there's so much distrust. I mean, the FBI has compromised their integrity. I don't know how many political leaders we can have in a row where you're like, please, like, let's have some good choices. People that, forget all that. One of our biggest strengths and weaknesses is our diversity, because diversity and unity, they're basically antonyms. And it's hard for us to go in one direction. It's hard for us to have a simultaneous truth. There are certain things we all agree on and we'll rush towards it and nothing can stop us. But we have a lot of internal arguments going on. And as a counterintelligence agent, that's all I need. If I want to exploit something, it's there.
Listen, do they teach civics class anymore?
Yeah.
They probably do.
Yeah, they probably do.
Okay. And that line about we hold these truths to be self-evident. Okay. What are those truths? That we are a government of laws, that no one is above the law, and that the president is not a king. I submit to you that this president has sought to prove those ideals false. And that is the way that democracies die. They don't die in coups. They die by the slow erosion of the rule of law.
Yeah, I mean, rule of law, it's critical. And ruling via executive order, which a lot of presidents do that. Well, every president does it more and more than the one previous. They are becoming more kingly, and it definitely creates a lot of problems because Congress won't act, and the president does, and that gives them power that the Congress gives. It's driving me crazy, man. It's driving me crazy.
Did you vote?
Of course. Now that I'm out of the service, I vote all the time. Yep, and I not only vote, I get involved civically because I feel like if you just vote, you're not respecting your civic rights that we have that are so precious here enough. And this is my soapbox. Everybody should go out and get involved. I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. Get involved. Be on a committee, host your party's, headquarters for your area, whatever it is. Your local government, your county government. There are open positions that you can volunteer on and contribute and get in front of the vote and create these options. A lot of times the vote is just a compromise. You get to pick. Instead, get involved and get in front of it and really put your civic capability to work and do something if you're passionate about it. Vote, of course. Do more. Get more involved. We all need, you and I know this. We all need more of that. We can sit on a committee with people you disagree with, and all of a sudden you can find the things you can agree on and do good work in that space. I don't want to take the last word though, Tim, but I do want to say this. Everybody should get the Folly and the Glory. It's fantastic. I've read it cover to cover and been back through certain segments. It's fantastic. It's complete and thorough laydown of the last, 70 plus years of our history with Russia. Tim, the floor is yours. What do you want to say in closing? And thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you. My mother was born 96 years ago outside of Nuremberg. And when she was 13, the government told her and her family that they were no longer citizens of Germany. Because they were Jews. And so they were stripped of their citizenship. My grandparents, who were partners in a little toy company that made wooden toys, their business was taken from them. And so they fled Nuremberg and they went to Paris. And that didn't work out too well in the long run because Paris fell. So my mother and her mother were trapped in Vichy, Paris. My mom was 17. And my grandmother was 50. And they made their way from Paris down to Marseille. They made their way from Marseille to Cuba. And they got the second to last boat that ever left Cuba for the United States in March 1942. And my mother, who grew up to be a very good historian, wrote of that passage across the North Atlantic that she went out on the deck of the ship at night and she looked up at the stars. And she said, "If I am saved It's after 5 years on the run. If I'm saved, I will try to put my life devoted to good works. And she became a historian, a very good one, a good mother. And that's it, people. Democracy is fragile. It is fragile. Do good work. And don't let the republic die.